Today, I want to talk about personal identity within the Amish community and what I dealt with when I was growing up. This is a conversation that I have been wanting to talk about for years, and it's something that I went through as a child that I feel like somehow never got into the conversation, never really talked about it, or it never really made it onto a platform. And that's why I'm kind of on YouTube because I get to say what I want to say and not worry about certain contacts being taken out or whatever, which is the case if I'm sure many of you know if you do an interview with, say, a newspaper and it's a televised interview and you talk with them for 2 hours and they only have a 5 minute time slot. Um, you don't really get to choose which of that 2 hour time frame gets put into those 5 minutes. So a lot of the conversations that I've had over the last 10 years have really been on other people's platforms. Other people had the ability to pick and choose what they wanted to portray. And that was something that always bothered me a lot because the words that I have said and used and the way that I portrayed myself and a lot of the questions, a lot of the interviews were about my Amish upbringing. And even though I don't consider myself to be Amish anymore, I still get a lot of interview requests. I turned down a couple of shows within the past couple years as I have been focusing on, my brand, Kate Stoltz. I'm a fashion designer. So I've been focusing on that. And then I also have another job that I do during the day. I work three days a week in the morning, drive to an office and work for another company. So I feel very fulfilled in that. I'm also an introvert, so coming online and like sharing my perspective is a little daunting to me. But it's something that I've wanted to discuss for several years, and I keep pushing it off, and I keep pushing it off, and here we are. But I think it's an important conversation because not only do I want to talk to other Amish people or other ex-Amish people, who, by the way, are like, if you guys are Amish or ex-Amish, please give me feedback if anything that I say is something that you feel doesn't isn't okay, like in terms of your own experience. If something I say you find offensive or you feel like it misrepresents the culture, please let me know because I am always open to learning, and I certainly don't want to push out other perspectives because I'm only one person, and the only thing that I know is my own perspective, my own kind of experience and perspectives. So let me know. Your feedback's important. But I think this is an important conversation for people, even if you didn't grow up Amish, because what I want to talk about today is that idea of being different in the world and having people look at you and see you as part of something instead of for who you are, for the talents that you bring to the table, and for the ability that you have to create change in the world and to even create change in your own life. Because when I was an Amish kid, one thing that I don't see people talking about ever anywhere, and it's something that I feel like has somehow always gotten cut out of those interviews, is the fact that when I was growing up as a kid, I would go out to public spaces and I encountered people making fun of me for the way that I was dressed, for my religious background, for the way that my parents were dressed, and common stereotypes like churning butter and, facts about my upbringing, like the horse and buggy. They were used to kind of poke fun at me. And it really, I internalized that a lot when I was a kid. And it was something that I dealt with as a teen. I would go with my friends to the bowling alley and we would be there bowling, and somebody would make some snide comments about, the uncool Amish people and like, oh, this place isn't cool enough. There's too many Amish people in here. Like, we dealt with those kinds of comments all the time. And it's something that I see even on social media that I really am genuinely concerned about in terms of the Amish teenagers that might not understand that their religion doesn't define who they are, which is why I want to address it. And again, this also applies to people that aren't Amish. They're, that have people looking at them, for the amount of money that they make, or the amount of money their parents make, or, the neighborhood that they grow up in, or the car they drive, or whatever. Like, kids are not very nice to each other. And, well, adults kind of use the same tactics a lot. Like, they're, one thing a lot of us have discovered is the same kind of tactics that kids use to make fun of each other is reflected in adult behavior as well. Um, so I don't think that's something that, I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because when I think of the way that I have impacted my family back home, I often feel like I have a lot of things that were left unsaid or kept out of the conversations that I had, that I think are really important context. And, that idea of just being able to see yourself and understand that you are an individual outside of your upbringing or your religious culture is something that I didn't understand as a kid. And then when I left, I was so desperate to leave my upbringing behind and to, go out and find myself as a person and who I really am. I see a comment, do you have any plans to do a Q&A? Leave some questions in the comments. I might not be able to get to them, but they might, I might be able to do a future session or a future conversation about them. But if you have any questions, just let me know, and I might be able to get to them in future conversations or today, depending on how this goes. But back to the conversation of, just as a kid, I didn't have people telling me that the people making fun of my religious background just didn't understand the value of personal identity, which is something that we all have to recognize that we have within ourselves. Like, it's not up to other people to determine who we are or how smart we are. Where we come from doesn't mean it doesn't determine whether we're smart or whether we just simply don't have any determination or whatever the kind of stereotype is. It's not up to other people to determine that. Like, we're the ones that determine that. And there were a lot of things that when I was living within the Amish community, I thought were issues that were specific to the Amish background. One thing that I can think of on the top of my head was I really did not enjoy the gossip. I think it's something that if you're from a small town or you go to church every Sunday and you need to see the same people over and over again, or you're part of a community or, a friend group or whatever, I think that's something that is pretty relatable. But when I was growing up, I thought it was an Amish thing. And I thought the personalities of the people that felt like they had the right to kind of dive into other people's business and talk about other people and, get involved. There was one minister in our church that was, that was who he was as a person. Like, he just really enjoyed getting involved in other people's business. He liked telling my dad how to, giving him advice on how to raise me as his, as a girl, and how he should be approaching, some of the issues that they were having. I was a pretty rebellious teenager, so there was this one minister that really wanted my dad to follow his advice, and I took that and a lot of other things, other human nature and behaviors. I understood that as something that happened within the Amish community and was exclusively kind of like an Amish thing. And in my head, I was like, oh, I won't have to deal with that when I leave. And well, 10 years later, I think my perspective of human nature and human behavior has evolved, because a lot of the things that uh, I might have blamed on my Amish upbringing, I experienced in all kinds of areas from all kinds of people. Um, and there's this kind of common narrative about the Amish people. There are a lot of stereotypes, and there's a lot of discrimination against the Amish people, which, uh, again, I don't know if you saw my video earlier today, but I kind of prefaced this video with it saying that, I'm not for woke culture or for canceling people. I think that it's important to have a conversation about the importance of seeing people for who they are instead of just pointing fingers and, kind of, one thing that really fascinates me about human behavior is the way that we look at things differently depending on the culture, depending on the religious aspect, and giving it different names. Um, and one aspect is, I feel like there are a lot of similarities between the shunning in the Amish community and the woke culture in that we experience on Twitter and Instagram and social media. This idea that, and I think the thing that like bothers me the most is when it gets down to people not being willing to just have a conversation and seeing things from other people's perspective, when it immediately turns into this like, oh, you're a bad person because you hang out with this person or because you said something wrong. Like, if it's consistent behavior and they're knowingly perpetrating, they're knowingly harmful, or they're being knowingly hateful, then that's a different conversation. But I think, um, I just think that's an interesting thing that I don't really, I don't know. I don't know if it's a fair comparison to make, but it reminded me of each other. There were a lot of things in like modern culture that, when you talk about the Amish community and the way they handle the kind of issues within their community, and I would say the same people that question those tactics, I see a lot of those tactics being used in modern society as well. And that, just being able to have that perspective and those different world experiences is why I'm at where I'm right now. I think it's important to not kind of perpetrate the idea that there are, the lives within the Amish community and modern culture are the same. There's a lot of differences. There's a lot of things within the Amish community that you don't have in modern culture, and vice versa. There are a lot of unique situations. The fact that the majority of Amish people don't have cars. You know, there are factual differences between the people that drive buggies and cars, for example. Or for example, the majority of Amish households don't have televisions. Some churches allow televisions. Some of the more modern churches, some of the more, I guess you could say, liberal churches actually allow televisions in their houses now. So there's a lot of differences. But what I have found to be very similar is the human behaviors that are exhibited within the people within the Amish community and outside of the Amish community. And I think that's something that some people don't necessarily want to admit or want to recognize. And as I said, kind of in the brief video this morning, is probably one of the most shocking, like, things that I felt about modern culture was realizing that this idea of individuality was not for Amish people, in terms of the way that the Amish people are talked about or even written about in mainstream media, in articles on major platforms and major newspapers. The way that the Amish people are written about is, I'm just going to say it this way. When when one Amish person is found to be guilty of something, it's always in the title, it always says Amish is found to be whatever, you know, if they, you know, in terms of the beard cutting incident many years ago, it was kind of portrayed as like these Amish vigilantes, and like it became a big news story. And it has become obvious to me that the some of the people that cover the news about Amish people don't necessarily hold the same standards for the Amish people that they do for other people. And that was a very interesting kind of observation, that I think people should be kind of aware that that's happening, because when you have a movie coming out about one religious community and the entire world kind of jumps on it and is like, this movie isn't acceptable, it's discriminatory because it takes, you know, several people from this religious community, and kind of portrays the whole community that way, and it's discriminatory, and anybody that promotes the film should be canceled. But then within the same month, a movie that portrays the stories of you know, several Amish people going through horrific abuse during their life, and it's portrayed as all Amish people are subjected to the same circumstances, and there's zero conversation about discrimination. There's zero accountability for anybody that supports it, that produces it, that promotes it, talks about it, has it on their talk shows. Zero accountability. So, which brings me back to, I'm not for canceling people. I'm not for kind of pointing fingers and using terminology to degrade other people, but I am for having a very important conversation in terms of, if you care about inclusion, you care about diversity and anti-discrimination, you should probably also think about the fact that the Amish people are individuals as well. Which brings me back to, if you are an Amish person, if you're a kid growing up within the Amish community, or even if you're growing up within a different religion and you feel like you haven't been supported and you feel like people are kind of attacking you for your religious beliefs, just know that it is a them problem, right? So like, and I wish I would have seen that when I was a kid, because it would have helped me understand a lot of the things that I really struggled with as a kid. And I blamed it, and um, I had a lot of negativity inside of me because I blamed a lot of the things that I encountered as a teen, even like the teenage angst that a lot of teens go through. You know, when I was a 13-year-old girl and I was dealing with depression and kind of dealing with growing up as a girl, there were a lot of those feelings that I blamed on being Amish. When after I left, I realized that it was something that the majority of girls go through during that age. And the reason why, I mean, I think it was twofold, if I'm being honest. I think part of it was I wasn't being told by the people around me, by the Amish people around me, that um, it wasn't presented as an individual kind of thing that was normal. So there was that aspect of it. But then there was also the aspect of, whenever I would see a story in the newspaper about Amish people, it was typically about negative behavior from Amish people. So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention, because it's something that I have been trying to talk about for over a decade now, and I felt for many years. But I feel like whenever I do talk about it, it gets pushed to the back, left out of the conversation, not included in the article. So that's why I'm on YouTube, because I can say those things. And well, if people want to cut me out of context, I can always link back to the video and say, hey, This is what I'm talking about. This is the full context. This is the full perspective. This is what I'm talking about. And with that, I think, it's important to reiterate. I don't think that the Amish lifestyle is like the modern lifestyle. I think there are differences between the cultures that are very relevant and very real. Um, but to ignore the similarities of human behaviors and also the fact that a lot of times when there are problematic human behaviors within the Amish community, it often gets presented as this is an Amish issue when in terms of abuse, that's an incredibly it's an incredibly tough topic to talk about, right? But it's something that with the Me Too era and with brave people constantly coming forward with their stories, it's become a very well known fact that this is an issue that is not confined by society or finances or anything else like that. This is an issue that around the world is something we have to deal with together. So, if you are Amish or ex-Amish or whatever, I would just encourage you to, if you think of something as an Amish issue, I would encourage you to do some research and to look into the issue further and to take from the education and information that's out there to help understand the subject at hand a little bit more deeply than what, say, a newspaper might tell you or a controversial show or movie that sees it as, and another thing I want to say is one thing that I've noticed with people coming from the outside to get stories from the Amish community and to tell the stories, I think that a lot of those intentions are genuine. I don't think, well, I'm sure there are people that are, definitely influenced by finances. People have to pay their rent, right? So it's not like people are doing projects for free. Like they come in and they want to make money off of it. But one thing that I think is very missing from, and I guess that's why there's this constant conversation of having, if the film is about Muslim people, for example, you should have Muslim people like in the studio cutting the film, working with like on the field, making sure that the stereotypes about the culture are not what drive the film. And it's the same idea for Amish culture as well, which is a little bit more difficult because Amish people don't necessarily talk about their experiences very often. When they're still Amish, it's mostly people that have decided that they don't like the culture and then they leave. And then that perspective of, well, that religion, and that's the mindset that I was in when I was 21 years old and I first left. I was like an angsty teen ready to get out there and discover myself. And that's the perspective that I put out into the world. And it was my perspective at the time. It was a valid feeling and a valid feeling of frustration. But at the same time, there were hundreds of my friends, my siblings that had very different perspectives that actually enjoyed the benefits of the Amish community. It's a very complex society. It's a very complex religious culture with many different churches, with many different kind of rule structures and experiences. I think one thing that's missing from, say, a movie about Amish people, directed and produced and cut by non-Amish people, which is something that came out this last, during the last month. The thing that's missing from that perspective is if you don't understand the complexity of the culture you're talking about, you're not going to understand what's happening. You're not going to understand the issues enough to dive into them and approach them in a way that is actually going to lead to positive change. So, and I think one of the reasons why I see the Amish community a little bit differently than somebody that has never experienced that is also because I have extensive family within the community. I have, all of my siblings are still living within the community. So that's another reason why I'm out here speaking up, is because in the back of my head, I'm like, are any of the words that I said during the last 10 years going to negatively affect my nieces and nephews? That's something that I think about, when I think about my nieces and nephews, that's what I think about. And that's why I've been wanting to come on and talk about this, because I think it's an important part of the conversation that hasn't been had yet. So I'm going to look at some of these comments. The White Wizard said, "Get yourself invited to podcasts." I have done several podcasts, and I do like that format because um, I was on Kate Brogue a couple months ago, and we were able to have a conversation. And one thing that I loved was it was an hour-long conversation, and after they, cut down the video, she actually sent it over and was like, "Can you approve this before I send it out?" Which is something that very rarely happens, and I had a lot of respect for her for doing that, because just the ability, just her being like, "Hey, can you approve this before I send it out?" was really refreshing. And I actually didn't listen to it. I just told her to push it out, because it's very hard for me to listen to old interviews and to go over things, because I don't like listening to myself talk. Um, so I was just like, okay, well, if she asked me that, I think, she's has her intentions good. So I do think perspectives. I think I think podcasts are a really good format, because there is very little editing. There's very little context that gets cut out, versus a magazine article that they only have a limited amount of space. And I don't think it's done to necessarily alienate the people they're interviewing. It's just they have limited space, limited time. And they need to cut it down to what people are interested in. So, um, which is why I think YouTube is a great format. I mean, you have to be careful, because there are people that are, spreading conspiracies and unfounded conspiracies or whatever. But I think there's a lot of really good information that you can find on YouTube that is unedited, and that's why I'm here. Austin says, "That's an interesting perspective, Kate. I definitely think it is dangerous to outcast someone who you don't understand without giving them a chance to have a discussion about it." Exactly. I mean, so one thing that I want to clarify is I'm not here to kind of elevate the Amish people in an artificial way, and say that the lifestyle is everything is positive and everything like that. But what I have seen get lost in these conversations, in the majority of articles about Amish people, is this idea that Amish people are individuals too. And if you are going to talk about Amish people, you need to clarify that you're talking about one person, because I think the majority of people are smart enough to understand when stereotypes are being put forward. But then there are, and I've encountered some people, especially on Twitter, that just simply don't understand that concept. And there are people that have like really argued with me about what it's like to be Amish, and been like, it's a dangerous culture. And it was all based off of something that they watched. And it was, something, I think it's fair to say, anti Amish. It was just like a show or a movie that was just basically utilizing the interest and the controversy around Amish people to make money, and just kind of using like harmful stereotypes to sell a film. So I think she watched one of those, and she was just like telling me all of this stuff. And I was like trying to explain it to her in a nice way, and she just couldn't grasp it. So I think the majority of people genuinely are interested in hearing people's perspectives. But uh, when it comes to the Amish people, I think that kind of idea has been left behind so much that uh, some people just feel very comfortable in participating in that. And I saw it with, I'm going to tell one more story and then I'm going to end it for today. But it kind of explains the whole experience that I had when I was, it explains kind of this kind of full circle experience that I had of leaving the Amish and feeling like I was going to be able to be myself and not have people judge me. And then finding myself within very inclusive, anti discrimination focused circles within the fashion industry and entertainment industry. And then seeing those same people post memes about the Amish people and realizing that it wasn't, there is a very strong difference between the people that are advocating for their own culture or the people and their current lifestyle and actively using buzzwords to do that, and the people that understand what it means to just embrace people and see them for who they are instead of their labels. And I think that's something that we all need to continuously work on, because it's not about jumping on the current trending whatever's going on in the universe, but of just, it's a constant thing that we all have to work on and something that we all benefit from if we do it, because it's really interesting to learn from other people and to get other people's perspectives. Shoe fly pie is nice with bourbon on it. That's another comment. I've never had that. That's interesting. Another comment says, you said that so beautifully, embrace people for who they are and not their labels. Exactly. Embrace people for who they are and not their labels, which does put a lot of, responsibility on ourselves, because we also can't rely on our labels to get us through life. We're the ones that are responsible for how people see us. But that's a positive. That's a positive. It means that we can go out and we can be the people that we want to be and not be held back by other people's opinions, not be held back by where we're born, the kind of financial structure that we're born into. We have the power to go out and make that difference. So I think that's it for today, but I just wanted to talk about this because it's something that I've wanted to discuss for a lot of years. And my goal is for this message to reach as many people as the negative stereotypes are reaching. The negative television shows, the negative movies. I think this, and the reason why I think it's important is because, again, like the people that I keep thinking about is the people back home, the people that are still living within the community that now have iPhones. It's another thing that a lot of people don't understand is this cell phone. The majority of Amish kids, well, I don't want to say all Amish kids because I know that that's not true. I know there are some Amish kids that are still isolated, don't have cell phones or anything, but cell phones are becoming a lot more, they're being used a lot more. And I see a lot of Amish people on Instagram. I don't see them very much on Twitter, but I know a lot of people that stayed within the Amish community. They're still living within the Amish community, and they're married. They have kids now. I see their younger siblings. I see my siblings on Instagram, and they're there. So they might not be commenting on what they see. They might not be commenting on the memes about Amish people or the stereotypes, but they see them. So that's the reason why I thought this was important to bring up, is because of those people. So I hope that if you are living within that community, and I'm personally glad that I left because it was good for me, and to the people that are still, even if you're not Amish, if you're whatever you are, just focus on being yourself, on being a good person, on creating a life that you love. And the people that don't understand it, they don't have to understand it because it's not their life, right? All right. Well, that's it for today. Enjoy the rest of the day. Hit the subscribe button. I did 2 videos today because I wanted to get this across, but I'm very busy. I'll probably do another one on Friday, but hit the subscribe button. If you get bored of me, you can always unsubscribe, right? And hit the like button, share it, whatever you want to do. But more importantly than that, be who you are and don't let people Don't let people's labels or, kind of outside opinions of you determine who you are. You know who you are, and that's all that matters. Focus on that. All right, peace out. Thanks for watching. Bye.